This research paper examines the limitations of artificial agents in replicating human-like moral reasoning, arguing that explicit ethical machines cannot be considered moral agents. The author leverages Alan Turing's theory of computation to demonstrate that moral reasoning is computationally intractable due to the halting problem. The paper formalizes moral problems into algorithmic moral questions and explores moral psychology's dual process model. It critiques the methodologies suggested by various academics for representing moral rules and principles within explicit ethical machines. The author concludes that it is not possible to guarantee with absolute certainty that explicit artificial agents will always arrive at a decision when faced with moral questions, a condition necessary for an agent to be considered a moral agent. The paper also discusses the importance of including artificial agents in the notion of moral agency, using Turing machines as a fundamental mathematical framework for studying artificial moral judgments. Turing machines, as abstract computational devices, possess the ability to simulate themselves, enabling self-reference and recursive reasoning. This capacity allows them to analyze, understand, and optimize computations by referencing their own programs. However, their self-referential nature also leads to limitations, such as the potential for creating self-contradictory programs. The halting problem, a fundamental limitation of Turing machines, reveals that they cannot predict in advance whether they are able to give an answer to specific problems. This inability to predict outcomes has profound implications for computational ethics, particularly in the development of artificial moral agents. Research on the frontiers of machine ethics identifies the limits of artificial agents in ethical reasoning. This is approached in 3 steps: formulating moral problems in algorithmic terms, analyzing moral psychology's ethical reasoning, and examining how artificial agents answer these questions. The concept of algorithmic moral questions is introduced, which includes yes or no type questions and open-ended what type questions. The focus is on yes or no type questions for simplicity, with the understanding that the conclusions are applicable to what type questions as well. The algorithmic moral question is defined as, given an action X, determine whether or not X has moral property P. This formulation provides a universal representation of ethical problems and enables the analysis of how artificial agents can address moral problems using human-like ethical reasoning. The human ethical decision-making process, studied in moral psychology, is also applied to artificial agents. This includes the social intuitionist model and the dual process model of moral decision-making. The analysis concludes that creating certain types of artificial moral agents is impossible due to the halting problem. The implications of these findings are significant, highlighting the fundamental limitations of artificial agents in ethical reasoning and the need for continued research in machine ethics. The dual process model is a normative ethical framework for artificial agents, emphasizing rationalization and consistency with prior moral commitments. It defines moral reasoning as conscious evaluation of moral judgments against moral principles and prior judgments. This leads to constrained algorithmic moral questions, asking whether an action is consistent with all prior moral commitments. Artificial agents can address these questions through self-referential capabilities, examining the impact of future actions on prior commitments. The discussion on moral reasoning highlights the constraints imposed by the dual process model on new actions to maintain moral coherence, linked to the self-referential nature of Turing machines. However, the halting problem suggests that artificial agents are incapable of making genuine moral judgments, making human-like moral reasoning computationally intractable. The field differentiates between implicit and explicit ethical machines, with research focusing on explicit moral agents using top-down and bottom-up approaches. Both approaches have limitations, underscoring the challenges in creating artificial agents that can engage in human-like moral decision-making. The development of artificial moral agents is hindered by the limitations of top-down and bottom-up approaches. The former relies on explicit ethical rules, while the latter involves machine learning and implicit moral principles. However, the halting problem, which makes it impossible to predict with certainty an artificial agent's decision-making process in novel scenarios, undermines the effectiveness of explicit ethical machines. This is illustrated by the concept of a moral checking machine, a thought-provoking example that demonstrates the impossibility of constructing a Turing machine that can predict with absolute certainty an artificial agent's moral decisions. A thought experiment involving a military drone controlled by an explicit ethical machine further highlights the limitations of bottom-up approaches. In this scenario, the drone's decision-making process is constrained by the halting problem, making it impossible to guarantee morally justifiable actions. The research emphasizes the need for a hybrid approach that combines the strengths of both top-down and bottom-up methods. In a complex moral dilemma, an artificial agent is tasked with destroying enemy aircraft while minimizing collateral damage and respecting international law. The agent encounters civilians being used as human shields, forcing it to reassess its actions. Unlike human operators, the artificial agent's decision-making process involves indefinite searching for new actions without reaching a conclusion. The proposed moral checking machine ensures the agent's actions are morally justifiable, addressing the complexities of autonomous decision-making in dynamic environments. The research underscores the need for a system that can guarantee moral certainty in the face of uncertainty, highlighting the importance of considering the halting problem in the development of artificial moral agents. In the realm of machine ethics, artificial agents' capacity for ethical decision-making is fundamentally limited by the halting problem, as posited by Turing's theory. This limitation stems from the uncertainty of whether a decision will be made or if the system will run indefinitely, exemplified by the moral checking machine thought experiment. The halting problem implies that even advanced artificial agents cannot guarantee with certainty that they will arrive at a decision, rendering knowledge of computability uncertain until the moment of decision-making. This limitation is inherent to the internal process, rather than the agent's nature. The unpredictability of explicit ethical machines' behavior in making decisions, due to their inferred ethical knowledge base, highlights the limitation in their moral decision-making capabilities. Consequently, it is impossible to create explicit ethical agents capable of moral reasoning whose knowledge base is constructed by a bottom-up approach. This limitation applies to machine learning models, including neural networks, generative models, and large visual models, as they are constrained by the physical devices upon which they are implemented and hence by the halting problem. In contrast, implicit ethical machines and top-down explicit ethical machines may exhibit reduced unpredictability in their behavior. However, the limitations of bottom-up explicit ethical machines remain an intractable problem. The distinction between these approaches warrants further investigation. The creation of explicit artificial moral agents is ultimately hindered by the fundamental limitations of computing machines, as revealed by Turing's theory. The importance of ethics in artificial intelligence is underscored by key works, including Artificial Morality and Learning in Multi-Agent Systems. Computational ethics is explored in Awad et al.'s work, while legal aspects are discussed in Chopra and White's Legal Theory for Autonomous Artificial Agents. Moral reasoning is highlighted in Paxton and Green's research. The computational complexity of ethics is referenced in Stensike's work, with nods to Turing's foundational work and ongoing discussions around moral machines, as presented in Wallach and Valor's research.